Welcome to Formed, where each week we navigate a relevant topic or question through honest conversations. We are three pastors with three different backgrounds on staff together at Irving Bible Church in Irving, Texas. We believe we are constantly being formed in the way of Jesus for the sake of the world, and we hope this podcast helps with that. So let's jump into this week's episode of Formed. Welcome back to another week of Formed, and the crew's back together.
Here we are.
Back on the green couch.
Back on the green couch. Last week, if you missed last week, we had Caitlin Shess on the pod, and it was a great conversation on just that complicated relationship of faith and politics and all of that. So
probably stuff we'll continue talking about as we get closer and closer to November. So
pretty relevant topic for the next handful of months. Speaking of that, I would say this topic isn't one that we're going to pull from a magazine or a news headline as far as discouragement, but it's something that's still so relevant for so many of us in this topic of discouragement, that I think so many of us could walk through these seasons to where we just feel like just getting hit over and over again. And it's like, man, why am I just living in the midst of discouragement all of the time? Yeah. How do I get out of this? So we're going to talk about discouragement, but also the power of encouragement at the same time. Yeah. So let's start with discouragement. What have you guys lived in a season of discouragement, and how did you walk that valley, I guess?
Yeah, I haven't personally ever been through one of those seasons. It's I've heard about it from other people.
I was trying to set it up.
Come on. Speaking. Yeah.
So, we did a recent survey of our church, and one of the things that we asked about was just some of the challenges that people in our congregation have faced within the last 6 months. And this was one that rose way up to the top of just dealing with discouragement. And Sissy and I have had very honest conversations even in recent days about the ways in which you can go through circumstances that are discouraging, which then can become stretches. You're going through a stretch that's just a discouraging stretch, and sometimes in that stretch becomes a season, and sometimes those seasons begin to overlap, and it starts to feel like a way of life. And so how do we fight through discouragement when we're going through those kinds of things? And I'm reading a couple books right now that I think speak to some of this. Some of it's for me personally. Some of it is also for trying to encourage our staff along the way as we're having conversations about managing the load and pace of ministry. And some of the things that kind of have risen to the surface for me thinking through that is, and have been really personally very helpful, is having a set of guiding convictions, right? That when you're going through discouraging circumstances, that you're coming back to the question of, who do I want to be, right? What kind of person do I want to be in the midst of this? And if you have those guiding convictions, that can really help ground you and guide you. So a set of guiding convictions, a support network, right? People that you can be with, and then healthy habits. What are the healthy habits? So just to hit a little deeper on those, for me, I've done some work recently just thinking through how would I name some of those guiding convictions in my own personal life. And a few that I came up with is that I want to be somebody who's about growing self-awareness. I want to be somebody who is practicing intellectual curiosity, that I want to continue to learn and grow and understand, emotional resilience, and then spiritual dependence. And so as I think about going through those difficult circumstances, how can those values, those convictions kind of guide me? I want to continue to become more and more self-aware. And of course, as self-aware as we might aspire to be, or that I might think I am, there's always more for me to learn about myself. You guys work with me. You know me well. There's things that you know about me, that you see about me, but that I still don't know and see about myself. But I'm constantly wanting to continue. So even in the midst of discouragement, it's saying, what's really going on here? What's at issue for me? Understanding my inner world so that I have a greater sense of, this is why this thing is discouraging to me, this circumstance, this thing that got said, or whatever. What's going on inside of me? How does this trigger something inside of me? So that sense of self-awareness, intellectual curiosity, and emotional resilience. What are things that I can do to learn more about understanding how to deal with these kind of circumstances. And so, asking questions and being curious. And what would emotional resilience look like? What would a emotionally resilient person do in the midst of these kind of circumstances? And then spiritual dependence, that sense of like, am I bringing this back and surrendering it to God? That am I fighting for outcomes rather than surrendering? We've talked about that idea that a soul at rest begins with a will that is surrendered to God. And so, that's that sense of guiding convictions. From there, that idea of a support network and just having people that you can unburden with, I think is so important in fighting discouragement. I have a group of guys that we meet together every couple of weeks, and just the ability to come there and go, this is what's going on. This is what's discouraging me. Of course, Kim, my wife, is that for me too, where we can just process what's going on, having that sense of supportive relationships where we can unburden. And then healthy habits. What are the things that I need to do? And we've talked, I think, again about this before, that oftentimes when stress gets high, when discouragement is high, the first things to go are the things we need most, right? Those healthy habits. And sometimes then the first things that we reach for are the things that we need least, those unhealthy habits. But am I cultivating that relationship with God? Am I spending time with Him? Am I practicing silence and solitude and Sabbath? Am I taking care of my body? And so making sure that I'm engaging in those healthy habits that help sustain me through, whether it's a circumstance, it's a stretch, or it's a season. Guiding conviction, support network, and then those healthy habits.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think, you started out with thinking about who am I becoming, and that's such a great question to ask. I think one of the things when we talked about quite recently was a lot of times our leadership adversity is an opportunity for our spiritual growth, right? And I think thinking about, even in these circumstances that I may find discouraging, what is God doing in me is such a good...
What's the invitation from God?
And I think
me?
You've really encouraged me in that, to be asking that question and thinking about it in that way. And that shift in perspective is helpful. I think for me, discouragement, as we said, is just part of the human experience. We all experience that. I think if you're in leadership, whatever capacity of leadership, you're certainly going to experience that. I think there's another layer when you're in church leadership, that discouragement. We can find ourselves in stretches or seasons of discouragement in that way. I think for me, the three things, similar to what you said, Barry, was one is just really staying connected to Jesus of those, and the three practices that have been helpful to me are solitude, silence, having that daily time of being alone, being quiet before God, receiving the love of the Father, and then Sabbath. I think for me, I would say in the last few months, Sabbath has almost become like a lifesaver for me.
Absolutely.
Which has been it's been beautiful. I've been trying to practice Sabbath for a few years. I think I'm finally getting into a good rhythm of how do I do this in a way that's healthy and life-giving for me. And it has just become this time of, certainly there's rest and there's delight, and those are wonderful things and things I look forward to. But it's also this just one day where it's my recognition of I don't have to produce. It's not about what I do. That God's in control and He will take care of all the things that I'm worried about, that I am trying to control. He's got it. And I take that one day, and then there are Sabbath moments throughout the rest of the day, so carrying that into the rest of the days. And so staying connected to Jesus, really being in intimate relationship with Him. I think, again, that idea of community is one of the key ways that we fight discouragement. Having those people that we can be honest with, that we can be vulnerable with, that know and love you, and will be willing to say the hard things to you, but also, they're for me, and they're going to pour courage into me. They're going to walk alongside me and bear those burdens with me. And so how do you have that sort of network of deep relationships? And then thirdly, similar to what you talked about with habits, I think it's a lot of times our discouragement can come, or a key factor in that is just exhaustion. Yeah. And so finding rest and having those healthy habits, for me, it's exercise and nutrition. As much as, I never look forward to I'm going to go work out. But once I do it, I always just feel so much better. And it's not even a physical thing. It's really mentally for me. It's really helpful to exercise and to eat healthy and to get enough sleep, all of those things. And so just even things like that, those healthy habits are really significant.
And I was especially mindful as you were talking about, I mentioned it and you mentioned it again, silence and solitude.
Yeah.
And, it's counterintuitive because for me, at least, when I'm experiencing discouragement, oftentimes part of how that plays out is like the spinning mind. I'm just dwelling on whatever it is that's discouraging me, thinking about it, catastrophizing.
Yeah.
And so it seems as though silence and solitude, like I wouldn't want to go be quiet. Like, let me do something that's going to like keep me busy and distracted. Yeah. And yet the busyness and distraction doesn't actually make the overwhelm go down or the discouragement go away.
Right.
Actually leaning into and learning to calm the spinning mind in the presence of God, in silence and solitude, is actually part of what helps, right? Sometimes I actually need to sit with it and bring it to the Lord and just speak very honestly about whatever's going on in me. And so there's that tendency of, again, the things that we need the most are often the things that sort of go the first.
Yeah.
And yet, if we can recognize, okay, what I really need in the midst of this is I really need to spend time in quiet, in solitude. I really need to go for a walk or go for a run or go work out. And, these things that we recognize that we reach for too quickly the things that don't actually help us.
Yeah.
And we let go too quickly the things that actually will.
How do you navigate that complicated battle, I guess? I don't even know if battle is the right word, between what is like warranted or versus what it, because discouragement, a lot of it's a mindset, right? Like it's I'm discouraged by X, Y, and Z that is happening to me in a way. How do you navigate that? Like, okay, well, to where you're setting in this moment of like, man, I'm discouraged. But it's like, well, you kind of played a part in it. Because I do this where I'm like, man, I'm just like really discouraged. But I'm like, man, if I just made a couple different decisions on a few other things, I wouldn't be in this spot right now. Yeah. But I'm going to set in my discouragement right now.
I brought
and just
this on myself.
Yeah, like how do you navigate that complicated battle, I guess?
Yeah, I think looking at it as what can I learn and grow from this, or not beating yourself up for it. So certainly some of the things that happen to us are a result of, I did this thing wrong. I could have done it better. But how can I learn and grow from that? What can I take away and move forward? I think a lot of times we can sort of go into, I'm going to just beat myself up and make myself feel bad about this. And that's not super helpful and can lead to more discouragement. Yeah. So taking a step back, looking at the bigger picture, sort of seeing the bigger perspective of, okay, like that didn't work out the way I wanted it to or intended it to, but what can I take away? How can I grow? And then even processing that with other people. A lot of times I can think, man, that was the worst thing in the world. And then when I talk it out, even as I'm talking it out, I'm like, well, actually, it's not that bad. Or the person I'm sharing that with, who I trust and value their opinion, will say, like, have you looked at it this way? Because here's what I'm seeing that I just had failed to see. And so some of those things are helpful to me in situations like that.
That's good. Yeah, I think about the fact that there are times that my own inner monologue is very different than what I would say to somebody else in the same kind of circumstances, right? Like I would, that inner critic that can be so harsh in the midst of those kind of circumstances, like I brought this on myself. I have contributed to my own problem. But then sort of being able to step back from that and say, well, what would I say to Sissy? What would I say to Isaac in the midst of these kinds of circumstances? That just allow us to have a kind of grace for ourselves that we much more easily have for other people than we can, I think, toward ourselves. And so grace for ourselves, but then just that recognition of, the old quip about, what's the best time to plant a tree? Well, 20 years ago. What's the second best time to plant a tree today? What can I do now, moving forward in the future, rather than, just dwelling in that place of regret for what's got me here? Well, okay, what is it that I can do now? What's within my agency that I can do now?
Do you find yourselves in seasons to where you feel like you're more of a discourager versus an encourager?
I'm not sure I'd say I find myself in seasons like that. I think I think naturally I'm not an encourager. Like, I just don't think I'm wired that way. I have to be really intentional to practice that, because I'm always looking at, like, how could we do this better? Let's focus on that. I am the person that doesn't take time to celebrate. So I really have to do this with our teams all the time. Like, hey, we're not going to move past this too quickly, because I know I can tend to say, let's look at all the things we could do next time that are better, but let's actually celebrate what happened right now, because this is really good. And so in the same way, I think I'm not naturally wired that way. To be very intentional, to try to see people and see the good things that God is doing through them and in them, and to recognize that and call those things out are, I think, some things that are super helpful.
And, we've talked a lot about the fact that in our friendship and working relationship, like the differences in our temperaments. And so I'm probably more naturally temperamentally wired to encourage people. And yet where I can fall short in this is when I'm self-preoccupied, right? When I'm preoccupied with what are my circumstances, or what is something that I'm just overly fixated on, whether that's in leadership or in life, in ways that then sort of blind me to what other people are going through. Or I need encouragement. I'm discouraged. So when I'm discouraged, I'm less likely to think about the fact that somebody else needs encouragement, which again is one of those things that actually, when we find ourselves in stretches and seasons of discouragement, deliberately practicing encouragement with other people is actually something that's really good for us, right? That we would actually, it helps us overcome that tendency towards self-preoccupation when we think about what does another person need, and yet it's the self-preoccupation that sometimes cuts us off actually from seeing what's going on in somebody else's life and moving towards it with encouragement.
That's good. Yeah.
Why do you think encouragement, why does it feel that encouragement lessens as you get older? Because I was reading this article the other day, and it was talking about just team sports at such a young age and how it's so full of encouragement from how to be a teammate and the coach and like all this stuff. And then how as you start to get older, you're not on these teams anymore, or most of us, and you were on our teams, but not that type of teams where like encouragement is a focus at such a young age. And as you get older, you really kind of like got to fight for it because discouragement, it feels like it's more like natural in a way sometimes than encouragement. Why do you think that as you get older, we kind of lose? It's not as natural to encourage.
I think there can be almost a sense that like you grow beyond the need for it, which is not true, right? And yet I think we can sort of think that way. You think about a child, and as adults, you just recognize the child needs encouragement. They need positive affirmation. And so it comes much more naturally. But then there's, I think, a sense that, well, surely at some point you outgrow the need for that kind of positive affirmation. And I mean, I'm 51 years old, and if there's a point at which you outgrow it, I haven't hit it yet, right? That the reality is, I mean, and again, this gets us back to the scriptures. Like the scriptures actually give us explicit commandments to encourage one another,
right?
And because that's that recognition that courage seeps, that we need those people who are going to put courage back into us, because we all go through those circumstances where the courage that we have is seeping out of our lives, is squeezed out by our circumstances.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. And the idea that kids are always learning, right? So they're always growing. So naturally, like, well, they're just learning how to do that, how to ride a bike or whatever. And so you're going to encourage them. Whereas for adults, I think you often think, well, they already know that. I don't need to tell them that because they know that. And that assumption is just completely inaccurate. I think all of us need encouragement. The person that you think is the most confident, they need encouragement. And so keeping that in mind, and how can you, and it's another opportunity to really see people and acknowledge, yeah, I see you. I see what you're doing. I see how hard you're working. I see how you tried that thing. everybody needs that.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
You mentioned scriptures a while ago. Are we called to be encouragers?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have explicit commandments to encourage one another. And when I think about encouragement from the scriptures, I go to a character, Barnabas, right? Because Barnabas is, interestingly, yet another Joseph in the Bible. We actually have several different people named Joseph, but we don't ever think of him by his given name. We think of him by what really is his nickname, Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. And so something about his personality, his way of engaging with people, was encouragement to such a degree that they gave him this nickname. And then you just look at the different events of his life, and you can see the way in which his encouragement to Paul was a huge part of the trajectory of Paul's impact in the world. Right? I mean, Paul, who is the author of a significant portion of the New Testament and who planted churches all over the Mediterranean world, but without having encouragement from a Barnabas, would Paul have ever had that kind of legacy? You see Barnabas' encouragement to John Mark, and eventually to agree that he and Paul actually part ways because of his commitment to pouring into this young man who's gone through this set of circumstances where he feels like he's failed, and yet Barnabas is saying, "I'm going to continue to believe in you and to invest in you." And you see even the way in which late in Paul's life, he's asking for John Mark, and the restoration of that relationship that I have to think is, again, part of Barnabas' legacy of encouragement. So we see this example in Barnabas, but then we also have explicit kind of commandments to encourage one another.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote down 2 of those commands. So Hebrews 3:13, but encourage one another daily as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. And then 1 Thessalonians 5:11, therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you're doing. And there's other places in Scripture that we're called to encourage one another. And I think that's because it's this recognition of discouragement is part of the human experience. And so we need one another to walk alongside us, as Barnabas did with Paul and John Mark, and to remind us of who we are, who God is, to remind us of how much God loves us, to help us walk in this way that is pleasing to God. And so we help each other not fall into sin. We remind each other of these truths so that we can grow in becoming the people that God wants us to be.
Yeah,
you know?
And part of that, the nature of that biblical command, I think, is the reason that it gets reiterated is it's just that kind of reminder. What's easy to do is easy not to do, right? Yeah. Encouraging other people is actually, it's not hard, right? Yeah. But what's easy to do is easy not to do. And our default mode is to the easy not to do, to just miss those opportunities. And so Scripture calls us again and again, just reminding us, you need to do this for one another as you're all going through your own difficult circumstances. You're all fighting discouragement. Do this for one another. Put courage back into one another. And I think about, I did a sermon a few years back that actually was one that ended up hearing from a number of people. Like that was really helpful just to give a very practical kind of framework for thinking about how we can fulfill those commandments to encourage one another. And I think of encouragement as, I see you, right? That there's something just profoundly important about feeling seen when we're going through difficult circumstances, when we're facing discouragement. Isaac, I see you, man. I see what you're going through. I see what you're dealing with. I feel you, right? That I have that sense of empathy that all of us need to feel felt, right? Like you get to some extent. You may not get it completely, but the fact that you have that sense of empathy for me puts courage back into me. So I see you. I feel you. I'm with you. That there's just something so important when we are battling discouragement, we're facing adversity, to feel as though we have people that are in it with us. I'm going to walk beside you. I'm going to be with you in the midst of this. And of course, that's part of what's so powerful about the idea of Emmanuel, God with us. We need that sense of a withness. And so I see you, I feel you, I'm with you, I'm for you. Like, I believe in you. I want the best for you. I'm going to do what I can to help you get through this, to help you overcome this, to help you grow from it, because I'm for you. And those are just simple ways for us to think about how we can express a sense of encouragement to fulfill these biblical commands, because what's easy to do is easy not to do.
Yeah, that's good.
Is there somebody in your life, like growing up, or it could be now, or that, like, man, they were a natural encourager for me that always stood out, and how it made you like feel? I know I'm just kind of throwing that one at you. But.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, I have a number. I feel like I was like, man, I'm so blessed because I've had a number of people who have done that for me. And the first two people, actually 3 people I think of are, I'll give you 2. So one is Mary, my best friend.
Mother Teresa.
No.
Her best friend, Mother Teresa.
I'm sure
My best friend, Mother Teresa.
kind of had dinner with her. No.
I had multiple people stop me.
I know. This is why I don't talk about that.
It's like, whoa, she knew.
Mary, my best friend. I'm just going with it. Mary, my best friend, who's been such an encouragement to me. Just you leave a conversation with Mary just feeling more hopeful, and I think she does that for everybody. And then the second person I think about is my uncle, who I lived with in Calcutta, and I saw him do it. He certainly did it for me, where he would see the potential in people and call it out. But I saw him do it from, what society would say the least to the greatest. So the guy who's the CEO of a company to the slum kid who's no one's thinking about. And I saw him see the potential in people and call them higher. And for them to see, I could do that. He believes in me. And just a beautiful gift that he had to do that. So, yeah.
That's good. I mentioned earlier the guys that I have breakfast with every couple of weeks, and, they are just committed to me, to be there for me, to be that support network for me, to offer encouragement. I would also say we have a group of elders at this church that are just amazing group, and we were together last night, and we're dealing with challenges and the hard stuff that we have to face in leading a church, and yet their dedication to encouraging me along the way is something that continues to kind of just help put wind in my sails, help me press on in the face of adversity or discouragement along the way. I remember actually when I preached that sermon, it was in the midst of COVID. It was a online, looking into the camera sermon. And I got a message from one of our elders, now former elder, but who actually took that framework and kind of filled it in of, this is what I see in you. This is what I feel with you, that, just I am with you and I'm for you in this way. And it was a really powerful, and it's funny, he's one of those temperamentally, like you were kind of describing earlier, not necessarily that you would think of this guy as a natural encourager, and yet his deliberate, intentional reaching out to me, not only then, but multiple other times along the way, was one of those that just really spoke deeply to me as a source of encouragement. So that group of guys has just consistently been for me over the course of these 5 years as senior pastor, a great source of ongoing encouragement.
Awesome. All right. Let's do banter.
It's banter time.
Let's have some fun with banter.
Let's do it.
All right. We haven't done this in a while. Read, watch, listen. Where are we at? What are we into right now? What are we reading? What are we watching? TV show, maybe a latest movie, or what are we listening to? We can't say Taylor Swift.
Oh, we can't. That's not fair. This week of all weeks, we are going to ban saying Taylor Swift.
All right, we can talk about Taylor Swift.
So at the encouragement of one of the guys from my breakfast group, my buddy Ben, who has been rewatching a classic comedy TV show, I've gone back and watched several episodes recently from a leadership perspective of The Office.
Nice.
And I'm enjoying that very much.
I do love it.
I've talked about my deep love for The West Wing and Jed Bartlett, and now I'm watching Michael Scott on The Office, and just having this realization of, I like to think of myself as Jed Bartlett, but in reality, I think I'm more Michael Scott. So that's been fun, from just thinking about the comedy that is leading a group of people. And so just recently finished the Eugene Peterson biography, Burning My Bones. Sissy had read it before, and it's been on my list for a while, but finally got to it and got through it, and it was just fantastic and really inspirational. A godly pastor that really lived out that little phrase, along obedience, in the same direction. So much of that was just really inspiring for me.
Yeah. I just finished, maybe not just finished, a week or two ago, The King by Jonathan Eig, which Isaac actually gave me as a gift because he knew I wanted to read that. So I finished that, which was a great biography on King. Just it's so real on this is who this man was. So the imperfections, because he's just a man, and yet the reality of how God used him so powerfully and how he was just really open to whatever God wanted him to do and leading our country in this way, and making such radical changes that took such incredible courage and fortitude and resilience. We talk about what it takes to be a leader and how he practiced those things. And so one of the best biographies on King that I've read. So that, and then I'm doing a deep dive in some podcasts on like nutrition that is just ridiculous. Like I don't even know what I'm doing right now, but there's this one called Zoe, and it's all about like brain health and all sorts of stuff.
You're going to be gluten-free in 2 weeks.
No, I don't believe in that. Sorry. If you're gluten-free, it's totally fine.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
This is why
don't send me the emails.
Sissy does not serve at the gluten-free communion table.
I actually do serve at the gluten-free table. I just don't like those wafers as much. But
gluten hater.
Yes, but awesome. I eat all the gluten.
I eat all. I'm reading Dune right now.
Nice.
Oh,
I'm halfway through and I'm loving it. I'm all
That's
in.
Impressive.
I love the 2 movies. Barb is just sick and tired of hearing about Dune. Because I'm all in. I just live in the world, I feel like, right now.
So you watch the movies, now you're reading the book.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I'm loving the book. We watch American Idol like every season. So Sunday nights we're watching American Idol, and it's a great season right now.
Sunday nights is American Idol night.
Yeah. It used to be Sunday nights that, and then Bachelor is Monday nights. Bachelor's over right now, so, and Love is Blind's over, so no.
I don't even know what to say about your shows.
Hey, Isaac, I see you.
Yeah.
I feel you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
with you.
Do you though? Do you like?
No, I don't get that. But hey, I'm trying.
I'm also reading a church like branding book, kind of. It's called "Be Known for Something" by Mark McDonald.
Nice.
That sounds cool. Yeah.
Just about what are you known for in your community and stuff as a church and all of that. But anyway, there you go.
There you go.
This is another week of Formed, and we'll be back next Thursday for a brand new episode.